Alrighty, everybody. Well, welcome back to the Baby Development Podcast. I'm super excited for today's guest. Today, we're talking about something that every parent navigates: starting solids, picky eating, and how to actually raise confident eaters without stress. So I am so excited to welcome Kathy to the podcast. I'm so excited to learn from you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, Kathy. So we start out the podcast with kind of a big question to get us to jump into conversation. So I'm going to ask you, if a parent listening today actually implemented everything you're about to share with us, what would mealtimes feel like in their home?
I would say there would be peace in the midst of chaos.
I love that. I think that's really hard to achieve, though.
It's very hard to achieve. But I think it truly starts with our mindset around feeding. And when we are confident in the role that we play at the table, how we're showing up, what we're feeding, when we take all those questions and guesswork out, yes, mealtimes are always going to be chaotic with a toddler. They're loud, they're messy, there's food throwing. Like, there's nothing, fit in a perfect box when you're feeding a baby or a toddler, but there can be mental peace on the parent side, and that truly impacts the mealtime environment.
I could see how if you feel calm and you feel in control and you feel empowered and educated on how the mealtime routine should look, it will trickle into everything else.
100%.
So let's start with, you work with so many families, which we'll get into with your mini-me method and some of your careers. So what are parents struggling with the most right now when it comes to feeding?
I think information overload.
Yes.
There is so much information out there, some really good and some really bad.
Yeah.
Misinformation spreads like wildfire, and clickbait is such a big thing these days on, social media. And so I think there's just a lot of information out there, and it's really hard to make sense of what's right, what's wrong, what should I listen to or what should I not listen to.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about this earlier, from expert to expert, when you're on social media, I think you think that people are producing content in good faith and not to get clicks. And I was kind of expressing to you that I didn't even realize that people would use clickbait in the niche that you're in, which is helping moms, feeding children, things that are really important, that I didn't realize that there would be misinformation in that space. I didn't think it would infiltrate into that space. So what are you seeing with all of that misinformation?
Absolutely. There's a lot of it. And honestly, I get so protective of parents.
I bet, me too, same.
I'm like, wait, no, these are like innocent moms who just want to do the best for their child and are also literally postpartum and navigating all of these different things. Feeding is only one piece of raising a child and all the things that you have to figure out as a new parent. And so, yeah, I get really protective of moms being like, no, don't stand in a grocery store aisle and freak them out about ingredients in baby formula or different foods, right? So my goal being on social media and working with clients is to reduce that noise and to help parents understand what is important on the feeding journey so that we can kind of tune out all that other scary fear-mongering stuff.
I love it. So where would you say on starting a feeding journey, when they come to see you, where do you like to start with helping them get support?
Yeah, so I work with parents who are starting solids, so with babies, getting geared up to start the feeding journey, and then all the way through toddlerhood, so navigating changes around the first birthday, transitions into toddler feeding, picky eating, a lot of challenges that come along with the feeding journey. But really, a lot of the parents that I work with, what I hear commonly from moms is like, I just want a plan. I just want somebody to lay it all out for me and tell me what to do, and I will do it, right? That doesn't necessarily mean a meal plan, though. So I think there's a lot of online today, there's no lack of meal plans or recipe ideas, or, you can chat GPT a meal plan every day if you want to. But really what I'm digging into is what worries you? What scares you? What fears do you have around feeding right now? How were you raised around food? What was your upbringing around food? Because those are all things that we are bringing into the feeding journey that are going to directly impact a baby or toddler's relationship with food, their interest in eating, their food exploration. So it really starts with the parent. Where are you? And how do you feel about starting this journey, so that then we can unpack those things and then move into exactly how do we support your little one to be a healthy, adventurous, happy eater.
Right. And so what would you say is the biggest fear that you're encountering with parents coming to you? I'm sure it varies, but what is something that you're kind of seeing as a thread in that?
Definitely varies, but fear of choking is a big one.
Totally.
Which I totally feel.
Yeah,
I experienced that myself as a mom. Not actual choking, but the fear of it.
Oh, right, yes.
And I would say also long-term fears. So fear of unhealthy relationship with food, or fear of like passing on my own eating or food struggles to my child. Fear of picky eating. Fear of, I've watched my sister's kid only eat 3 things, and I'm so afraid of that being my child. So I would say those are some of the fears. So with the picky
eating, do you think, because I get that question a lot as well with picky eating, and maybe we can dive into that kind of sector a little bit more of what is the root of picky eating? Would you say that comes from the parent as well, or just as much as the child? What does that look like?
There's a lot that goes into picky eating. And oftentimes, especially in toddlerhood, I see picky eating as a symptom, not as a problem. So a lot of times we do need to kind of dig into what's causing the picky eating. Is it our mealtime environment? Is it a lack of schedule or routine? Are we snacking all day long? Are we drinking too much milk and that's filling us up, and so we're not actually hungry for meals? There's a lot of different things that go into picky eating behavior that we see in toddlerhood versus true picky eating, which also has a genetic link to it, right? So there's a lot of different things that contribute to true picky eating. What I really look at is what are we facing? What are the struggles that we're facing with our little ones eating? Are they eating from multiple food groups? Are there certain textures that we're stuck on or not willing to explore? So we're looking at, what angles of picky eating are we dealing with? And sometimes it truly is, I'm always looking for, do we need to refer out to another specialist? Do we have a true chewing or swallowing issue where we need like speech therapy or someone else in our corner as well? But what I do find a lot of times is, the word picky eating is very objective, or the term is very objective. So everybody defines it differently.
Sure.
So I see a lot of parents after the first birthday being like, oh my gosh, my baby used to eat everything, and now all of a sudden they're so picky. And we label them as such when really they may not even be picky yet. We just might not understand all of the different developmental leaps and changes that little one is going through. And if we're not clear in that, then it's really easy to then jump to labeling that child as picky,
right?
Where there's a lot that we can do to support them in that stage too. So picky eating is multifaceted. I think with the age range that I work with, I'm more looking at how can we prevent you from getting stuck in true picky eating cycles, which a lot of parents start habits that they don't realize what they're actually going to lead to. So, a 1-year-old who stops eating so many different foods, so we start catering to exactly what they will eat, we are creating habits that are potentially going to pigeonhole us down the line.
Right. I think that makes so much sense of you're inadvertently or accidentally, there's no malintent in creating a picky eater, but you're just trying to cater to your child.
Right.
So is that a conversation you have within your practice of having that conversation of, hey, we maybe shouldn't cater to our child this much, or try this, or What does that look like to a parent today who's like, I think I'm doing that to my kid on accident?
100%. I think the first thing that we have to understand is that learning food takes time. And even toddlers are still learning food. So this is one reason that I am so passionate about getting babies started off on the right foot, like when we're starting solids. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit, but from 6 to 12 months, there is this window of opportunity essentially to get a wide variety of foods, textures, flavors in front of a baby and create an exploratory environment around food before toddler opinions and desire for control and all independence, all these things start setting in toddlerhood, and that exploration gets more challenging. So that's one reason that I love getting ahead on that end. But for parents who feel like, okay, I maybe am catering to my little one, it's still totally possible to get out of that at this point. Like if your little one is 1 year old, you are not stuck in habits. They are still so moldable and changeable. And it's not just the way they are. We can do so much to support them for you to be able to move out of that and for your little one to be able to move out of that.
Yeah, I feel like having that idea that it's not just set in the way it is and that they're still malleable with their development to have that kind of flexibility is really key for parents, because I feel like the kid gets stuck, so the parent just gets stuck as well.
Right.
And then I feel like that's an uphill battle with what do I feed them when they only like 3 things?
Right.
And then it just kind of, do you notice that gets even more reinforced the older they get if they don't get unstuck?
100%. And we have to recognize, as I was mentioning, the learning food takes time, right? And so it actually can take over 20 exposures to the same food to really determine a preference, so a like or a dislike. And so actually talking about they really like this or they don't like that is something that I encourage parents not to label, especially in this season of feeding a baby or a toddler, because we're not actually trying to figure out what they like or don't like at this point. We are building their preferences.
That's really interesting. That's a really incredible reframe, I think, to help with parents in that journey of, because I've done it, well, my kid doesn't like eggs and it's just, he doesn't like it. And so then you reduce the exposure to eggs because you already know that they don't like it. And so I like that idea of exposing them 20 times to determine a preference. Is that something that you recommend somebody can start today at home to start testing?
100%.
Okay.
The other thing is that food burnout is real. So whenever you say, like my son doesn't like eggs. So I'll tell a personal story. Like when my son was 10 months old, he loved broccoli. I thought I had hit the jackpot, right? I was like, dietitian mom, my kid loves broccoli. I won, right? And so I started serving it like 3-4 days a week. And around 11 and a half months, he was like about to turn 1, completely stopped eating broccoli, like went off of it 100%. And reflecting, I realized that was my own mistake. I had overdone it. I was like over serving that food and realized that I had actually created burnout for him. Whereas, in my dietitian brain, it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so many nutrients here. I love that he's eating broccoli, right? I wasn't thinking from that standpoint. And so we took a break from broccoli. Like I took it off the menu for like 2 or 3 weeks and then started reserving it. And then he came back around to it. And so I think that's also an important thing to take into account is food burnout. And sometimes when we as parents are like, oh, my little one really likes eggs right now, so I'm just going to serve eggs all the time because we know they are nutritionally dense. Right. They provide so much good nutrition for them. But sometimes we overdo it and unintentionally create that burnout too.
Right. I think what's an interesting part that you said too is even if you are creating the burnout, you revisited it again.
Yes.
And so is that really an important part? Because then that would mean that that's not necessarily burnout if they're revisiting it and accepting it. It's just taking a break.
Yeah.
right?
So it was taking a break and coming back to it and then reevaluating, how am I approaching feeding at this point? Am I feeding based on what I think he will or will not eat? Or am I feeding based on bringing a wide variety to the table based on exposure, all those kinds of things. I think the other thing that's important and helpful for toddler parents, especially, is rebranding food. So, and what I mean by that is we rebrand to the toddler, rebrand to the toddler's preference of, if they're not into scrambled eggs right now, there are so many other ways that you can also make eggs. So, hard boiled egg, over hard egg. Could we do a hard boiled egg and let them peel it themselves? French toast, where there's egg on the toast. So omelets, right? There's so many different ways that you can prepare the same food too, where we may just be burnt out on seeing a food in that particular way too.
I love that. So rebranding the food sounds like a really great strategy for a lot of parents who are stuck on a specific food. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
I love that. So I wanted to talk about kind of your signature insight or your core philosophy, something you said earlier, that parents play a huge role as the model in the feeding relationship. So what does that look like day to day?
Yeah, it looks like being at the table and eating with your child. This can sound so simple, but it truly makes such an impact. And I find that for a lot of parents, and this is in no way to point fingers or cast blame, because this season of parenting is so busy, is so all-consuming. But what I see a lot is parents kind of making their little one's feeding journey about them. So like baby or toddler has their high chair wherever it is in the kitchen, and we just put food there and expect them to eat while we do the dishes or while we wash the bottles, or maybe you sit there and talk to them while they're eating, but you're not actually eating with them. Or come dinner time, we feed the little one and then mom and dad fall on the couch after bedtime and eat their dinner in front of the TV, right? There's so many different things that we could unpack there, but the biggest thing that I'm looking at is babies and toddlers quite literally are learning how to eat food, which we talked about, but they need an example to follow. So actually watching you physically eat food teaches them how to eat food. And so they really need that model at the table to learn not just habits, and that's a whole other area that we could get into, right? Of like how much benefit there is to family meal times and having that protected time to sit down together as a family. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? This doesn't have to be every single day, but when we make a concerted effort, it makes a huge impact. And so not just habit-wise, but also practically, tangibly, when you pick up a fork and stab something on your plate and put it in your mouth and chew it, your little one watches all of those things and it connects the dots for them of, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do too, right? If we just set food down in front of a baby or a toddler and they have no example to follow and we're just trying to convince them to get food in their mouth, one, there's no enjoyment in that. It feels like a business transaction. And two, they have no example or model to follow.
That's such a good point. There's just no model. It's with anything in development, like they need to be able to see it and mirror and model.
Yes.
And so when you're at the table, is there a strategy that you like as like the ideal setup for being this model to a baby or toddler?
Honestly, yes. And it makes your life easier too, because when you do have a separate, like, oh, we're feeding the baby or we're feeding the toddler and then I'm feeding myself, it's like your whole life revolves around food, right? If you have multiple times a day that you have to feed your little one and then you also have to feed yourself, it's like it never stops. You don't get a break. And so aligning your eating, and again, this looks different in everyone's schedules, routines, family habits, and that's why I dig into this so much with my clients. It's like, okay, how can we make this practical for you and your family? But aligning your own eating patterns or habits with your child's. So dinner time is family dinner time. It's not we're feeding the baby and then we're feeding ourselves, right? So I think that is just a habit of practice that creates that environment where you know your little one is going to have an example to follow no matter what. And then also you're feeding yourself too. Because I think for moms, especially in this season of like having a little one 2 or under, like you are focused on doing everything for your child. You're doing everything for everyone else all the time. And it's really easy to forget to feed yourself or nourish yourself or pay attention to how much your nutrition matters. And so that's really what I look at blending together is how can we make sure that parents aren't putting their health on the back burner in this season of just trying to meet everybody else's needs, because your nutrition matters too. And so when we combine those things together, then your baby gets a role model or your toddler gets a role model. Mealtimes are more enjoyable. And you're also like making one nourishing meal for the whole family that provides or meets the needs of all of you.
Oh, that's incredible. I love that of really kind of putting some more prioritization on the parent and the mom who just, I mean, I remember eating like my kids' leftovers and I was like, I think I ate, you know, and I'm sure that's such an experience for a lot of parents too, because they're just trying to do their best and trying to do good and feed their kid first and their 100%. Children first. So I love how you said make one nourishing meal for your family and then it fits for everybody in the family. So can you talk more about what a nourishing meal looks like for your family from your, you know, your dietitian nutrition background?
Absolutely. So when I'm looking at making a balanced plate, I'm going to go kind of high level here, right? We're not going to get too technical or nitty gritty, but I'm looking for a carbohydrate, which is the number one fuel source for both your child's and your brain. So carbohydrates are essential. I know carbs get a really bad rap.
They sure do. Gosh.
But they are important. And they also provide a lot of other nutrition outside of just carbohydrates too. Like they provide fiber, they provide other vitamins and minerals that are also important. I'm looking for a protein. Protein sources are super important for little ones for development, but they also don't need as much protein as you might think. Protein hype is also really real on the internet. But we don't need to be like protein, you know, loading everything for a little one, but protein is an important part of a balanced plate. So I'm looking for a carbohydrate, a source of protein, and then a fruit and or vegetable, which would also count as a source of fiber. And then super important for little ones is a source of healthy fat or an energy dense food. And sometimes that can be included by ways of cooking. So if you cooked with oil, for example, that's going to check that fat box, right? Or maybe it's we add avocado to the plate or something like that. But yeah, I'm looking at those components to build a balanced meal. And then depending on whether you're feeding a baby or feeding a toddler, then we're looking at what pieces of that meal are most important for a baby or for your toddler.
And what would, like, let's break that down. What would you say is the most important part for a baby? And then we'll do toddler.
For a baby, I want to see a source of iron. Iron is a key nutrient for both babies and toddlers, but iron needs are actually higher for babies than for toddlers. So babies are storing iron in utero. So when you're pregnant with your child, they were storing iron from you. And then by 6 months of age, they have used up those iron stores. And so it becomes really important that we start providing sources of iron through their diet. So sources of iron are going to be things like meat, eggs, beans. Those are like animal sources of iron. And then also healthy fats. So I'm looking at sources of iron and healthy fats. The reason for the healthy fats is because babies are growing and developing at such a rapid rate, and they require a lot of energy to do that. Fat is the nutrient that provides the most, like I call it, bang per bite, okay? Because it has the most calories per gram. And so it provides a lot of density in small amounts. And when we're looking at feeding babies, they don't eat that much. So we want every bite to count.
Bang for bite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That makes so much sense of when you frame it as bang per bite, especially if you start getting the picky eaters and all of that too. I'm sure that's just really valuable to get as much as you can in that bite.
Absolutely.
And what are your favorite fat sources for a baby, or foods that are easy to implement?
Sure. So avocado is top easy. Again, any oils, and you can like mix that into things, right? So if we do mashed beans and put some avocado or olive oil in there, mix it up. Also, maybe we throw a little bit of like cumin or something in there, make some like taco seasoned beans, right? Because that's the other thing is we want babies' food to be flavorful. It doesn't have to be bland. But right there, you would have a source of iron in the beans. You would have a source of fat in the oil, and then bonus flavor if you threw some seasonings in there, right? But avocado oils, nut butters are also an easy source of fat. But also they are a top allergen and can be a choking hazard if we're just serving like peanut butter on a spoon, right? We don't want to do that. But could be mixed into yogurt. So like full fat dairy is also a great source of fat. So like a full fat Greek yogurt, you could mix some almond butter or peanut butter in there, and that is going to give you a lot of healthy fats.
And how much would you say is what we're aiming for, like in a yogurt peanut butter situation? Like what are we looking for them to consume?
I love this question because I can't give you an exact answer, right? There are guidelines. There are ranges in terms of portion sizes for little ones. But when we're looking at building a healthy relationship with food and a baby or a toddler who stays in tune with their own hunger and fullness cues, they should be the one leading how much they're eating. So the idea that you need to get a whole container of like 4 ounces of purees or something like that into your child, that completely takes away from them being able to self-regulate and listen to their own body saying if they are hungry or if they are full. So it's really not your job to get a certain amount of food in your child's body.
I love that. And just the exposure and the right sources.
Yes.
I love that. So now let's go. You did the baby. What is the needs for a toddler?
Yeah. So iron and healthy fats are still super important for toddlers. Carbohydrates are also key though. So carbs are really that easy, quick source of fuel and energy. And carbohydrates should actually be making up about half of a toddler's daily intake. And I hear this from parents all the time. Like, I'm worried that my toddler's eating too many carbs. Like, or they only want to eat fruit or bread. And yes, we want more nutritional variety than that, right? If your little one's only eating fruit or bread, then we probably want to dig into some things there. But those foods are also providing valuable nutrition that they actually need. And so for a toddler, I am looking at that balanced plate that is really easy to kind of mimic what's on the parent's plate. So if the parent is providing or making a meal that includes a carb, a protein, a vegetable, and a source of fat, that is easy to essentially just like deconstruct or possibly modify a little bit to be age appropriate to then also feed to your toddler.
I love that. I feel like it kind of takes us into some of these mistakes or myths, because I hear it a lot too, especially in the toddler space. You were touching a little bit on the protein hype.
Yes.
Tell me more about that and maybe why it's not as necessary in your toddler's diet.
Sure. So protein is an important nutrient. I don't want anyone to hear that it's not important, right? But I do think we've blown it out of proportion, and this could apply to any nutrient, whether it was protein or anything else. If we blow it out of proportion, then we lose sight of all the other pieces of the diet that make up a well-rounded diet and really serve a purpose, right? So no one nutrient or one food can do everything that your body needs. We need that variety. But when we're looking specifically at protein, toddlers' protein needs are actually fairly low. So it's really easy to meet their daily needs. So a toddler ages 1 to 2 needs about 13 to 16 grams of protein in a day. That means if they ate like 1 egg and 2 pieces of bread in a day, well, 1 egg, 2 pieces of bread, maybe a tablespoon of peanut butter, okay, you've met your protein needs. Or if they drink 16 ounces of milk in the day, they've met their protein needs. That's not to say that we only want them eating those foods or that we want all of our protein in the day coming from milk, but it is really easy to meet those minimum protein needs to where I don't think that we need to put so much focus on making sure that they eat 2 bites of chicken at dinner, right?
How do you feel? Let's go into that of making sure you need to eat 2 bites of chicken at dinner. What are your thoughts on kind of that rhetoric around get your plate clean? Some maybe from our generation of, a lot of shame in not finishing your food, or on the other side of that, what is some things you're hearing now, or what are some of your philosophies around that?
Absolutely. So from a nutritional standpoint, first of all, we have to recognize that 2 bites of chicken is not going to change your little one's nutritional picture that much. It's really not. That is such a good point. At the same time, what it is going to do is hinder your little one's interest in that food because it adds pressure and it takes away from their autonomy and individual interest in that food, right? So if our goal is to raise an eater who is adventurous and wants to try new things and is essentially easy to feed, right? We have to create an environment of curiosity, not of control. And when we take on our job as the parent to control what our little one is eating, first of all, we negate whatever they are feeling in their own body, right? We cannot feel our little one's hunger or fullness cues. And they are really reliable when we don't mess with them. Okay. So a baby is born with very intact and reliable hunger and fullness cues. It's when we decide, no, you need 2 more bites of chicken, or you haven't eaten enough yet. You can't go play until you take 2 more bites. Or on the flip side, no, you've had enough. That's all we're having now. And there's no way you could still be hungry, and we're not willing to honor continued hunger, right? That kind of shuts down their trust in their own body.
That's so true. I feel like a lot of parents, again, inadvertently do this because of just concern that they're not eating enough, or they're overeating.
Totally.
And I feel like that kind of conversation around that and having this education and awareness around that of simply, it's not going to change their picture, their nutritional picture, is such a good point, because at the time, 2 pieces of chicken seems bigger than the picture is, right? Yeah. It's like at the time you're panicked. Yeah. But then it's like, it's just 2 pieces of chicken. What is that going to do long term, or zoomed out, when you're not in this panic state that they're not getting enough?
Exactly. And I think that's the key, is being able to zoom out and understand, how do we meet your nutritional needs over the course of days and weeks and months? And that's really hard to do without a clear picture of what they really need, right?
Right. So let's go more into some practical tips. What are 3 things a parent can start doing today to improve meal times? And I know we kind of just touched on it, but I want to really give some good tips for parents that they can implement today.
For sure. I think the first one is, and this is hard, okay? And I know that everything that you are doing at the table comes from a good place. Like, you just want your child to be nourished and fed, and you want them to sleep through the night and all the things. That's a whole other area we could go into. But the very first thing is to stop talking about the food. We spend so much time trying to get our little ones interested in the food. Like, are you going to take a bite? This chicken's really yummy. Oh, I made this special for you. Or you liked this yesterday. Why aren't you eating it today? Right? All these different things that just add pressure and actually hinder your little one from wanting to take an interest in eating. And so at this age, right, for little ones under the age of 2, we really don't need to be talking about the food. We need to be letting them explore. And this is tip number 2, I would say practical tip number 2, is to let your little one get messy.
Oh, that's a huge one.
Let them play with their food. Don't expect them to do everything perfectly. Like they don't have to always use their utensil. They can alternate between the spoon and their hands. They can windshield wipe the food across the tray. They can take a bite and spit it out and make a funny face and then go back for another bite without you jumping in, being like, oh, did you not like that? Or what was wrong with that, right? Or, oh, do I need to make you something else? Because those are all the things that hinder what is truly just normal development.
Right. That exploration is completely independent from liking the food. 100%. Is that what you would say is something you're noticing? Is they're correlating it between a dislike or like?
Yes. Or thinking we have an issue because we're spitting out food. And the thing about spitting out food is, on one hand, it's actually very protective. So it's protective from choking. If your little one has something in their mouth and they haven't figured out how to handle it, or they think they have too much, or they don't know what to do with it and they spit it out, that is actually very protective against choking. So we never want to force a child to finish or swallow something that's in their mouth. We also have no idea what kind of experience they're having in their mouth at that point, right? So if we think about blueberries, for example, you could eat one blueberry that's like really sweet and crunchy, and then you could eat another blueberry that's squishy and tart, and you have no idea what you're getting at what point, right? So let's say your toddler's really into those sweet, crunchy blueberries, and then all of a sudden they get a squishy, tart one, and they're trying to spit it out, and you're trying to convince them to keep it in their mouth. That can completely turn them off from blueberries.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
For the future.
Yeah.
So that is something that we want to give autonomy to, right? So I think as parents, this is something that I just see commonly, is we don't give little ones enough credit for all that they can do themselves. Mm-hmm. We think it's our job to like jump in and do it all for them.
Right. That makes so much sense. And then I think going back to like the blueberry example is the variability in non-processed food, like fruit and vegetable, is where picky eaters could potentially start stemming those behaviors, because like a Cheez-It or a goldfish is the same every time.
Exactly.
But a blueberry is variable every time.
Exactly.
And so that must be a lot to process. And so could pick the easier route of something consistent every time. Do you notice that as well?
100%. And that's why that repeated exposure is so important, so that they can build trust with that food, because it takes time and exposure to really learn to like know, like, and trust a food. Yeah. Essentially.
I don't think I've ever realized how much trust goes into food exploration and eating, from the child, but also from the parent, to trust the child and trust themselves.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trust that goes into that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think what you just mentioned about consistency, even, or predictability, right? It's really easy as parents, I think. And this, again, just happens because of real life. Like, you don't have endless hours in the day to feed your child. And sometimes it just feels easier to give them the food that you know they're going to eat, because it is more predictable, right? So you do have to invest time into giving your little one that space to explore food, but with the consistency piece, right? I think it's really easy to say, well, I know they will eat the Cheez-It, or I know they will eat the puff, or I know they will eat the pouch. And when we only, right, not saying that those things are bad, but when we tend towards those things because we want a sense of predictability, or because we want a sense of consistency from our little one, we're kind of in the wrong lane, because toddlers aren't supposed to be predictable or consistent. That's our job as the parent.
True. That's an excellent point. And then I think I cut you off, but what was your third tip?
Oh, I don't think I even got to it.
Okay.
Let's see. Practical tips. I would say the other thing would be to have fun.
I love that.
At the end of the day, when you're feeding your little one, like, it's easy to just be tired. You have had a whole day too. You have things that are on your plate that you're navigating. And it's really easy to just come to mealtime and think of it kind of as a business transaction of just like, okay, just sit down and eat your food, right? And we forget to have fun. And fun. If we want our little ones to enjoy food, we have to also, again, going back to the example piece, we have to show them how to enjoy food. And so that doesn't have to look complicated. That doesn't have to look like being a clown at the table, but it could be laughing. It could be telling jokes. It could be talking about your day, like just creating an environment that you welcome your little one into and get to say, hey, this is what family mealtimes look like. And now you get to be a part of them, instead of just creating this like culture around just feeding your baby and then hoping that one day they fit into what the rest of the family does.
That's a really interesting take of like integrating them into like this cool experience that's very unique to every family too. To frame it in that way is really special. I haven't heard it framed that way. That's really cool. Okay. So I wanted to talk about something I get questions about all the time, which I'm assuming on your end you do too, which is baby-led weaning.
Yes.
Where do we start?
Okay. I personally love baby-led weaning.
Okay.
I think it's great. It's also not a requirement, and it's not a picky eating, prevent all feeding challenges ever situation. The way that I think a lot of times it gets framed, especially in social media, it's like, oh, if we did baby-led weaning, then we should never have a feeding problem ever.
Right.
And it's not a cure-all, right? It's also one way of feeding a baby. So again, I love it. I'm a big supporter of it. That's personally what I did. But it's not for everyone. And I think it's really important to be able to identify if this is the right move for me or not, because the concept of baby-led weaning, and I think we've kind of gotten off track with what the concept of baby-led weaning is.
Yeah, let's revisit that. Okay. What is baby-led weaning?
The concept of baby-led weaning is providing your baby with solid foods from the very beginning of the feeding journey. So we're skipping purees. We're going straight to solid foods, and we're letting baby lead, meaning that they are self-feeding from day one. So going back to there's not a specific amount of food that your baby has to eat, right? Baby-led weaning truly puts your little one, your baby, in the driver's seat, okay? The other piece of it is that it's intended to make your life easier by being able to give baby parts of the family meal. Right. And I think where we've kind of gotten off track with it is that we've just really boiled it down to, oh, if I just give my baby big pieces of food, then I'm doing baby-led weaning.
Right.
And that's not entirely true, right? The other thing is that by 9 months of age, regardless of how you started, whether you started with purees or with solids right out of the gate, we should be advancing textures. So we don't want to stay on thin purees or certain textures or consistencies for too long, because that can create long-term feeding challenges. So when a parent says like, oh yeah, we've been doing baby-led weaning and our baby's 1, right? At that point, like, you're not doing baby-led weaning anymore. You're feeding your baby in an age-appropriate way.
Right. Okay.
Right?
That makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So going back to baby-led weaning, right? If you feel comfortable and confident giving your little one solids from the very beginning, it can be really great. It's also really important that we take a look at your diet, because if what you're eating is nutritionally appropriate to also give to your baby, it can make your life a whole lot easier. It gives them a lot of variety and textures and flavors and all these different things to explore, which is amazing. If it creates anxiety and stress for you and you don't even know what to feed them and you're just going off of like a baby food checklist, or you start making all these like baby-led weaning recipes and you're driving yourself crazy doing it, then maybe that's not the best for you, right? So I think combo feeding is also great. You can do a combination of baby-led weaning and purees. You can start with purees. Even if you start with purees, we just want to advance textures on an age-appropriate timeline. And the other thing is that you can practice self-feeding either way. So even if your baby starts with purees, you can start off like preloading a spoon and handing it to your baby, letting them bring it to their mouth, still honoring or still letting them self-regulate appetite, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach feeding your baby. I think that's really important for parents to know, is that there's not one right or wrong way.
Right. But I will say that in the age of social media, in the age of all of this access, it certainly does feel like there is only one way to do baby-led weaning, and the charts and the checklists and the, timelines where it negates a lot of nuance between families and between your children or one child.
Totally.
Culturally as well. And I think a big thing that I always come up against is the choking versus with the baby-led weaning. Like they're going to choke, and there's a lot of stigma around that. That makes no sense to give them a chicken leg and at that age. So can we talk a little bit about that issue with choking versus what's typical, what's not typical, what you've seen, and the fears that you were saying a lot of parents have around it?
For sure. So there's a big difference between choking and gagging. And gagging is a normal part of the process. Gagging is a normal part of babies learning how to essentially move food around in their mouth, expel it from their mouth. Also, their gag reflex is the strongest from 6 to 10 months. So it is very normal for babies to gag and try to expel food from their mouth. The difference, though, between gagging and choking, right, there is a large difference. And so when we're looking at feeding solids or practicing baby-led weaning, we want to make sure that we're confident in those differences so that we know when to act or when not to act. The best tool for gagging to have in your toolbox is to, well, first of all, we never want to stick our finger in our baby's mouth. That is number one, because that can actually push the food further back in their throat and increase chance of actual choking happening. So despite everything in your gut that tells you to stick your finger in their mouth, we want to try to not stick our finger in their mouth and actually coach them through spitting the food out.
Oh,
so
interesting. Okay.
Literally put a piece of food in your mouth and show them how to spit it out. Like big production, right? So that they can, again, mimic you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And do that themselves. The other piece is you staying calm, even though I know that's really, really hard to do when you're watching your baby gag. But if you are really anxious and worked up, they're reading you. They're looking to you to be like, Mom, what do I do? Dad, what do I do? Right? So the more calm that you are, the more it helps them. But so gagging is a very normal part of the process. In terms of, is baby-led weaning more of a choking risk? When we do it safely and appropriately, no. So the research is very clear that there's not a higher risk of choking for babies who practice baby-led weaning versus those who start with spoon feeding or purees.
Wow. Interesting. I didn't know there was research like that to support that.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And I love the idea of teaching or mimicking and modeling spitting out food. I don't think I've heard of that but it makes a lot of sense because they just have to be modeled everything. Why not a protective kind of reflex to spit out your food?
Yeah. I don't think we give enough credit to how much as parents we actually have to teach our kids how to eat.
Yes, I truly don't think, being in my space of development, it's with everything else, with crawling, walking, rolling, breastfeeding. We just had a guest on talking about that and modeling. And I don't think I've ever thought about modeling the physicality of eating and feeding. And it's so important because there's so many structures up here too that need a lot of education and kind of integration of how to use them. So I think that's so important, really helpful.
And development and practice and repetition, right? Like chewing is a learned skill. Chewing is not something that babies just come out knowing how to do, right? Yeah. They have to exercise those muscles and learn how to move food from side to side in their mouth and how their tongue goes along with all of that, right? So there's a lot of learning that happens there. And I think we don't always realize that. We just think like, oh, you just put food in front of them and they figure it out.
Yeah. And it's so innate too. So it's one of those things that it's, you kind of take it for granted how skilled feeding is.
Yes.
And I think doing it correctly is really important too. It's setting a good foundation, I would say.
And I would say, and I do love that you say that, and I appreciate that. I also think I never want parents to hear like, I have to get it all right. Right. Yeah. Because like doing it correctly can mean a lot of different things. Sure. There's so many different things that we can do to support little ones on the feeding journey. And I work with a lot of moms, and myself included. As a first-time mom, I felt more pressure to like get it all right feeding my child than I think I did anything else. And so I think it's important for parents to know that you don't have to do it all perfectly. You're not supposed to be perfect, but your child needs you and your presence in this process. And even if you're learning along the way, you're learning along with them, right?
Right. I love that. I think that's going to be so helpful. I want to talk about your expert framework, the mini-me method. Where did this come from? What is really driving that? Tell me more about it.
Yeah. So the mini-me method is my signature coaching program. It's where I work with parents starting solids and working through toddler transitions and feeding into toddlerhood. And a lot of the things that we were talking about earlier, like digging into what are your fears around feeding? What are your goals around feeding? What was your upbringing around food? Where do you struggle in your relationship with food? And then giving you that really clear picture of what your little one needs nutritionally and how to meet those needs practically in real life without all of the second guessing and questioning. That is what I built into my coaching program. So it's a 12-week coaching program where I work both one-on-one and in group settings with parents to really transform their feeding journey from a place of stressful feeding to joyful eating. And on the back end, how we kind of wrap everything up in the program is with streamlining, meal planning and family habits and routines and navigating mealtime behaviors and being able to apply all of everything that we've discussed today and more in a more personalized way. Because like, as you were mentioning, every family is different. Every household is different. There's cultural differences to consider. There's every feeding journey is different. And so when we can really dive into all of those things and put it on a personal track of actually building sustainable habits that you can be consistent in, it really sets parents up not only to have more confidence in this season of feeding, but also to continue on raising healthy, adventurous eaters for the long term. So
that's incredible. Congratulations, because that's something that is so needed in our community. And I think having somebody like yourself kind of leading that way is really important. So I want to give you your flowers on that, because that's amazing.
Well, thank you. I am really passionate about it. I love the work that I get to do with parents. I spent 7 years working in a children's hospital in the clinical setting, and I loved my job there, but I just always was craving more time with parents and with families. And there's only so much you can do in like a 30-minute session, right? So to actually be able to work with parents on a longer period of time.
You really get to know kind of the dynamics between everything too. And there are concerns that I'm sure come up every time you check in with them. It's something new or something better or something we can tweak. And that's really cool.
So we're able to like problem solve and troubleshoot and navigate all the, little ones are constantly changing. It's like every other week they're sick or they're teething or this new thing's happening. And then how do we factor in food and all of that? And just to take the guesswork out just takes a huge thing off of a parent's plate.
That's incredible. So where can they find you to get that resource? Is that a website? And I know your Instagram, so feel free to plug everything.
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at the Mini-Me Dietitian, or on my website, www.theminimedietitian.com. I do have a lot of like free feeding resources and things there. I also have my own podcast called Food for Tot. Right. that you can listen to on both Apple and Spotify. And for my coaching program, it is something that I keep small so that I can provide high-level support to every one of my clients. So I launch that in cohorts a few times a year. And so if you're following me on Instagram, you'll know when I'm launching that. But you can always apply with the application either on my Instagram or my website.
Kathy, this has been so incredible. It's going to help so many moms. I'm sending them all your way on Instagram. Go follow her because your content is gold. It's just great little tidbits to help to, really support your child's feeding journey. And so thank you for your time here. And yes, everybody go check out Kathy at the Mini Me Dietitian.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. This is the Baby Development Podcast, and we'll catch y'all next time. Bye, guys.